Friday, June 23rd, 2023. Eventually, and I'll say this, I would love to do a call for order and that we will actually do a roll call. So we'll practice that in July. All right. And since we're starting call order and we do have quorum, is that correct? Do we have any excused absence that we need to announce? Or are we all set? Okay, so we have one excused absence. Thank you. All right, do we have any public comment? Hello, welcome. Come on up.
Sure. Or should I?
You
You can stand, sit, whatever you'd like.
join us?
You know, actually, if you're there, then the people on Zoom can't see you because the camera's right there. So you might want to go.
Why don't I move? You can
Maybe I
come
do
take
wanna
your
see.
seat right here and then everyone can
Come
see
hang
you.
out with me.
We don't know where you should stand.
We're working it out. It's hybrid, so we're gonna be fluid and flexible.
Sure, I'll sit.
Thank you.
So thank you for.
So thank you for coming for comments. You do have 2 minutes. I will ask you to refrain from giving out any of your personal information, phone numbers, email addresses, or anything like that.
Okay,
And if the staff wants to contact for follow-up, they'll follow up with you.
great.
So
If
we'll
I'm
do
a
that.
little over 2 minutes, is that okay? I'm gonna shoot for 3, hopefully.
Let's go for 2 and see how we do.
Okay.
All right,
Great.
sounds good. Go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Okay, my name's Matthew Schick. Hopefully that's not too personally identifying. I've
Nope,
been a
that's
Portland
perfect.
resident for 15 years. This is about the commercial film industry using Portland parks as launching pads to send commercial drones into residential areas without providing any advance notification to residents about what is happening. I understand this is a minor issue relative to a lot of things happening in the city, but it feels like we should not be letting our public spaces be degraded like this when there are regulations already in place to prevent it. Here's what happened, 8 a.m. on Saturday, May 27th, which is Saturday of Memorial Day weekend, 8 a.m. A large drone appeared over my backyard, maybe 100 or 150 feet up, not very high above the treetops. This is a large, noisy commercial drone, more akin to a very small helicopter, the sound of it, rather than those little whining ones that you hear sometimes flying around. So large drone, 8 a.m. Saturday morning, hovering over my backyard. My partner and my 3-year-old daughter were in the backyard at the time. I heard the sound. I rushed outside, not knowing what it was. I know I'm not the only one in the neighborhood who initially thought that perhaps this was a police drone and that we were in an unsafe situation, we shelter in place, maybe there's an armed suspect in the area. Who knows? I don't really think that was an overreaction on my part. Needless to say, my 3-year-old daughter was very upset about the whole situation, both the unfamiliar noisy object in the sky and then being urgently ushered back inside in case the drone was an indication that we should not be outside. Once it became clear that there were no police cars in the area, I thought it was safe to assume that this was not a threatening situation. But at that point, I was pretty angry. I followed the drone for a bit until I saw it land in Ladd Circle. It's the neighborhood's Ladd's edition. So it landed in Ladd Circle, where there was a large operating crew gathered, about 8 people. There was a location manager there who showed me a permit from PPNR and explained that they were filming for the movie Little Wing, which is being filmed in Portland now. He explained, and they also were quick to explain that there was nothing legally prohibiting them or any drone or helicopter operator for that matter from flying as low over my backyard as they wanted to. Another person was also quick to point out that one of the business partners of the drone company is the head of aviation head of the Oregon Department of Aviation, appointed by COTEC. Anyway, they were not there to film in the parks. They were there to launch and land in the park and then film the surrounding residential area. They continued to fly around Ladd's edition for the rest of the morning and again for several hours in the late afternoon and evening. It's a large noisy drone, large movie industry grade video camera flying around the neighborhood for much of the day. No public explanation as to what was going on, what was being filmed, how long this was going to go on, how to opt out of having your backyard filmed, etc. And I spoke with many neighbors who, like myself, were unhappy about the situation. The following week, I started to dig into things a little bit. Here's what I found out. The movie Little Wing is being produced by Paramount. The Parks permit was granted to an entity called Eli Animal LLC, which is presumably one of their subsidiaries. They hired a company called ACAM Aerials to do the filming. Portland City Code prohibits drone usage in public parks in chapter 20.12.180, quote, no person shall operate any remote controlled internal combustion powered vehicle or any remote controlled device or electric or internal combustion powered watercraft or aircraft in or over any park except in such places as the director may designate for such use. When I emailed PPNR about these designated areas. I received very prompt response from PPNR employee named David James, who told me that at this time, there are not any designated areas for use of a drone in public parks. He also told me that quote, use of a drone may be included in a film permit when specific requirements and conditions are met. When I asked him what those requirements and conditions were, he responded very promptly, said it included an unmanned aerial vehicle insurance, proof of FAA certification and flight plan, in addition to the site plan and everything else that's usually required. When I asked him how the film permit was able to get around the prohibition in chapter 12.180.20, I received no response. When I asked a few days later, again, same question, and also how I could get a copy of the flight plan, again, no response, silence. I submitted a PPNR or a public records request for a copy of the complete permit application. That was sent to me promptly by Mark Ross. I'm happy to share any of these documents with the board at any point. What they show is that one, the site plan submitted was not accurate, but much more importantly, two, no flight plan was submitted. There was something labeled a flight map, which simply showed an overhead picture of Ladd's Addition with some arrows, a big red X, a couple of circles, but no flight plan, no flight path, no altitude, no how long they were, nothing that anyone would think would be part of the flight path. But it was very clear that the filming was going to be happening over the neighborhood and not over the parks. Yes, so in conclusion, what we have here, a film production being granted a permit to launch and land a drone in a Portland park based on an incomplete and inaccurate permit application. Two, no explanation as to why or how PPNR is able to issue permit for activity that's in direct violation of City Code 20.12.180. And three, an apparent open door for film companies to use Portland parks as launching and landing areas for drones and then fly into residential neighborhoods, film there for however long they want, wherever they want within FAA guidelines without notifying anyone in advance. My request here is just that the Parks Department either obey the city code and prohibit the drone usage except in designated areas, or which seems most obvious to me, do require a detailed flight plan, make sure that's actually provided as part of the permit, and then also require that if the flight is going to go into residential areas, that the residents are notified in advance, so we don't think this is a shelter-in-place situation at 8 o'clock on a Saturday morning. That's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. I just want to open up the floor if there's any clarifying questions. That the board has.
It would be great if we could actually have that written testimony so that we can follow up further. That'd be great.
Okay.
No clarifying questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Do we have another public comment?
None that have shown up, as far as I can tell.
Wonderful, thank you. Do we have general announcements? All right, moving forward to approval of May meeting minutes. Do we have a motion, any section? Second?
Sue-Ann?
It's for the little typo, it's the event that was cited, it's not July 11th, it's June 11th. So
Which event?
that's, there's a opening of the children.
Oh, the Children's Arboretum.
Anything else?
With that correction, so moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes for May?
Aye.
And have everybody?
I'm abstaining, I was absent.
Perfect, thank you.
Seconded.
Great. Thank you. So we're moving swiftly through this meeting and we're going to go to the director's report. So Director Long.
Thank you. I know that you all received the parks monthly report, but I'm just going to highlight a few items. I want to note that yesterday, Commissioner Ryan released a press release announcing that Northgate Park is going to be the site that was selected for the North Portland Aquatic Center. So, work will continue as it relates to the facility, the size of the pool, and addressing the financial gap. So more to come on that. Obviously, we're in summer, so happy summer. The programming and operations is ramping up. Our outdoor pools opened yesterday. So that was, of course, not too much drama, I think, my understanding. And of course, in addition to our own programming through Summer Free for All, which kicks off next week, just a reminder that Parks Plays hosts to hundreds of permitted events throughout the city. That being said, we've actually been really focusing our efforts to proactively activate, manage, and attract new events, especially in the downtown core. Specifically, our permitting team has been reaching out to large production vendors and third parties to help support and manage the multitudes of smaller events that have received small grants this year. Also, we've been incentivizing permitting and rate structures through new programs and fee waivers to encourage activation. And we released open RFI solicitations for event companies and partners, activations at various sites, including O'Brien Square and Director Park. So, oh, and finally, also, we're going to be hiring additional park staff that will be available for park site visits before and after some of these large events, to make sure that our partners are being accountable to their permits. So we're really excited about that work. We anticipate that through all these activations, we're likely going to be doubling the number of permitted events downtown this summer. So mission accomplished. I wanted to talk a little bit about Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. The report was finalized and shared with all of you. If you haven't gotten to it, it is in your inbox. And we are working to translate it into 4 languages, and also just to ensure that it's completely accessible. It'll be up on our web pages, etc. I want to thank any and all park staff and board members who participated in the work of Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland over the year. The report is a milestone. It's not a final destination. As you know, this work is iterative and ongoing. So we're actually working on plans on how to use the actions and results framework that we created each year to lead conversations around goal setting, strategy, and budget decisions. And so it's really exciting to operationalize all the work that we've been doing over the last few years. So again, we will keep the board engaged and involved in all of that work. And in particular, listening and learning, which we're going into our 3rd wave of listening and learning this summer. We're going to be focusing on recreation, getting some people's feedback and interest around recreation in parks. The community engagement team has drafted survey questions, and they're preparing a whole roster of tabling and community organization sponsored sort of sessions. The staff has reached out to the community engagement working group to invite board members to participate as volunteers, and I'm sure Corbin's going to promote that later. And so we hope that folks will join that training and become volunteers as we finish that. We go into that 3rd wave of learning and listening and learning. Sustainable Future. In May, we conducted group interviews for a new Parks Levy Oversight Committee members. And new members have been identified and will be joining the PLOC, as we refer to it, starting July 1st. I want to thank Kesey, who will be serving in a liaison role between the Parks Board and PLOC. And I just also want to mention, I know we brought the 2004 cost recovery policy to the board previously. It's been formally adopted, and I believe it's filed with the city auditor's office. So that's exciting. The next steps for that group is we're going to be working on a standard operating procedure process template for cost recovery practices. So that work is going to be managed by division leads and our chief policy analyst, Melody Brooks. I'm going to take a breath and pause, and just in time because Chris has a question.
Yes, it wasn't in particular what you were reporting out on, but it has to do with what isn't the subject of the monthly report. Specifically for Delta Park Powwow. I was able to attend on Saturday and Sunday as a tribal member and Indigenous community member. I want to commend Portland Parks and Recreation that had increased park ranger presence there. It was great to see park rangers there over the weekend and be able to interact with them a bit. I did want to ask just a little bit about the increased park ranger presence because there is a lot of events going on in Delta Park at the same time as powwow with the softball event. So kind of managing traffic is a lot. And I can see in the monthly report that there's a request from the public to, in future years, to manage soccer and or softball tournaments that are also going on in that same weekend. So from what happened this time, what are thoughts about next years? And there's also some reports of harassing and abusive behavior from the community. I didn't see any of that this year, and that increased park ranger presence may have helped that. So was there any reports of that this year, or did the park ranger presence help with that?
Thank you so much for that question. Actually, we worked very closely with the Bow and Arrow Club to do two things this year. Well, let me just preface this to say, we've had a major softball tournament that is on the same weekend as a powwow for many, many years, and soccer is just constant, right? So the request that came from Bow and Arrow Club was for us to have less events. And so we actually, this is the last summer that softball tournament will be at Delta Park during that weekend. We're either going to try to find another weekend or another location. We were unable to do it in time this year. And we did not permit as much soccer on purpose. So they actually had more space. They expanded their footprint of the event, as well as increased parking. So we've made some incremental improvements. And yes, there was some harassing behavior on the part of spectators from the softball league or the softball games in previous years. And that's why we were very sort of solicitous. So the ranger presence, and also you probably didn't notice it, but there was a lot of sports staff that stopped by, as well as maintenance staff.
Okay.
So there was a
I
lot.
didn't notice that.
I think Maximo, you stopped by as well, right? Yeah. So yeah, we were just trying to be responsive to activities in the past, and I think it worked. We didn't hear any complaints. We just had So next year it'll be even bigger, and we'll have even less competing uses in the park. And just so to be clear, the Delta Park powwow is the longest running powwow, I think, west of the Mississippi. So it's really important that we are host to that and that we're being good hosts. Any other questions about my report? Oh,
Sorry, it's kind of a dumb question because I wasn't able to track it, but it's a budget question. So is all the parks entries on the change memo approved in the final budget?
yes.
Thank you.
I love those easy questions.
No question.
Sue-Ann?
Yeah, your first item regarding Commissioner Dan Ryan has announced the North Portland as the site for the aquatic center.
Northgate.
Since we, as a board, we have looked at the survey and information, it seems like there was a tipping direction toward the Universal Park location. Is there a reason or something that kind of jump out that missed, or is the other choice, there's a compelling reason that we should actually be mindful of?
It's a great question. You're right. I mean, when you look at all of the input that we received from the multitude of workshops, as well as the focus groups and all the input that we received beyond that, Northgate and University Park were certainly neck and neck. The commissioner was really moved by the diversity and the number of youth, that sort of demographic for Northgate. And he also felt that there was a lack of city amenities and investment in that particular community. I mean, they're so physically close in proximity. Just to be frank, he really noodled on this for a long time and asked for even more additional data and demographics. So I know that it was a really thoughtful on his part. And, you know, it's going to be a great aquatic center. I mean, it's really a 2-mile difference. And we know that people are going to travel, you know, from the University Park neighborhood as well. It was really close. So I hear you, but I think that, you know, certain things really resonated for him. I think also the school, like there was more school children, not more schools, but more school children that would be served in Northgate than University Park. I mean, he really we were pulling a lot of data for him.
Thank you.
Dr. Corbin?
Is your question alongside this?
Nope, so I
Okay,
can wait.
I have a jump, and you know, what I'm gonna probably say is, understanding the diversity of that particular area, what is being done to make sure that those community members get to stay put when this amenity comes online.
I do know that there is, that we've been doing a lot of work with the Bureau of Planning Sustainability and with PBOT around ensuring that you know, like mitigating the potential for gentrification. And I can't speak to specific actions, but we can certainly have them come back and have a conversation about it. I know that it was a part of the work in identifying and selecting locations as well. I don't know if Lauren? If you're on the line and you heard that question,
I did hear it. And I think you answered it. We'll be looking at that more carefully as we go forward. We do want to also point out that we do not have the money fully secured yet. So we still have that giant hurdle to get over. Yeah.
My concern is that because it has been put out there that this is the area in which this amenity is gonna happen, that landlords and businesses are gonna start changing some things around before we
even
actually
with-
have it, and before we break ground on it. And so I would love to see what type of policy, housing policies, whether that is you know, rent control or any sort of displacement, you know, prevention in place. So I would love for them to come back as, you know, we go through the different stages to
Yeah.
see how we're making sure that these communities are actually gonna benefit from this really wonderful amenity that everybody needs.
Right. Good point, and we'll continue to work with BPS and see if there's anything specific that we can call out and bring back to the board.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Ally, go ahead.
Yeah, under the assets and development, I saw that there's, says there's an ADA program annual report. Is that correct?
Yes, and I believe, that's a citywide.
Oh, so
It's
it's
a-
not just parks?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, we report out on our transition plan annually. But I think that references to the citywide.
Okay, is it possible to see the transition plan?
Absolutely.
update? Okay, great. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Adina? Would the board like to see the ADA transition plan report from this year?
Yeah, I think that's what Ally had asked for.
Yes, Lauren, thank you.
Yes,
Okay, no problem. We can do that.
Wonderful clarifying question, is there a park portion within that citywide?
yeah, okay, so there is a citywide ADA plan, and then, yes, we have our own transition plan. It has 1,700 items, something like that need to be addressed. We're not making great progress, despite the fact that we have annual allocated funding towards it. So, but yeah, we're happy to bring it.
So Ally, you appreciate having an actual report for us to comment on, is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, if other people would like it, yes, I know I certainly would like
I-
it.
We can make it a staff presentation if that's an
I think
interest.
that would be great. We can talk about that. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Sue-Ann.
Oh, great, Sue-Ann, go ahead, thank you.
Just a follow-up comment from Dr. Corbin regarding looking into possibly protecting the community, especially rent control, anything like that around Northgate. Aquatic Center's potential pretty long stretch of construction. It's going to also impact small businesses in the area. And anything the small businesses can get some support that will be great. A lot of times, that's also, again, like the landlord, they will say, I can raise the rent because it's going to be a hot spot. And small businesses squeeze away, or the construction is so destructive, dusty. No one comes to a little cafe. All those can be very destructive. And if the whole process can engage with the community there to be more mindful and help them to kind of thrive through this process and construction, that will be really, really going to make a big difference.
Can I add something to that?
Please go ahead.
So Portland Audubon is up Cornell and the tunnel's closed for, it was like 6-9 months or something, and there was almost no notice. There was no accommodation, even like signage is really hard to work with the city on. So making sure that folks, local businesses are notified way in advance so they can plan for it. They can tell their community members, their patrons or consumers, whatever, what's going to happen and how it's going to happen in length of time, help with maps if there's detours. All of that was stuff that we had to just like beg for and like create our own. It was really hard to work with the city, and it was a big impactor for camps, and I mean it was huge. So
Thank you, Ally. It looks like we have a hand up. Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to let the board know that the project is big enough that it will be complying with the regional workforce equity agreement that is in place, which does many things. It has apprenticeships that are required by the contractor. It has trainings that are required by the contractor. It has requirements for utilization of local businesses, and there's lots of provisions in there to help address what you're talking about. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, Director Long.
Oh, thank you. So I just wanted to, because we didn't do introductions, Lauren McGuire is our program manager for assets and development for those board members who are new. And staff, as you chime in, if you could introduce yourselves for the rest of the meeting, that would be great. Thank you.
Question over here? Raise your hand.
No, I was waving at Lauren.
Oh, okay. Director Long, do you have anything else to
I do
add?
not. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. One more question?
Sorry.
We're not quite done. Go ahead.
Speaking of that, can we at least welcome or introduce our new members at the new today's program, or is there a moment for that?
You just made it.
Oh.
So thank you so much for that, Sue-Ann. So we do want to welcome our new board members online. We have Matt Shipley, right? And to my left, you have Patty Miles, welcome. And then to my right, you have Jonathan Eckhart. And I guess we're new too. I'm calling her my co-chair until we figure out something better. So we have Alana here, and I'm
still
the-
says vice chair in the minutes.
It does. I consider her my co-chair. So that's what I'm gonna call her. And I'm the new chair. And I also want to thank Bonnie for being our chair, as well as Casey as being our vice chair. And Suen, thank you so much for making the movement. All right.
We should, if we're doing recognition, recognize that Paul is here for his last meeting with us.
And former chair as well, got us through the pandemic, so very important, very important. So again, Suen, thank you so much for making the space for that. All right, it looks like we're rolling over to the working group reports, and we can go ahead and get started with the board affairs working group.
We didn't have a meeting, so we didn't, I don't have a report, but I would like to just mention a thank you to all the members of the working group for working hard by email and Google Docs to bring forward the revisions to the proposed purpose statement and the board duties. If anybody has a question, happy to answer.
Thank you so much, Casey. And we're gonna move to the land use and infrastructure working group. Reporting.
I don't have any report in. We did have a meeting. Wait, Lauren, what was it, 2 weeks ago already? And we're adjusting our meeting schedule so that we can have a little bit more time in between when we do our work to be able to get the minutes back to the board in time to have it be. So I think we pushed it back a week so that we can have a little bit more preparation time for the group. And Paul, thank you for your part in that group, and I think we've got some open slots in the group if the new members are interested. We'd love to talk to you about that.
We're gonna have some time later when we're doing some workshops. Casey.
I do have a question. And I took a look at the report, appreciate you sending it in. And I'm sorry to harp on a particular project, but I don't see the North Park blocks on the list of things you guys are following. And I guess I'm asking, are you guys following that? And if so, how?
We have been, and so I'll have to look at that list again and make sure that we keep it on there so that we can get regular updates on it. I can't remember.
Lauren.
Yeah,
We actually do. We're combining the Broadway corridor and the North Park blocks. That's why you
Okay.
don't see that listed.
Right, I appreciate that.
good call on. Thanks, Casey.
So financial sustainability working group and importance.
Sorry.
Oh, and
Sorry, can I jump in on land use and infrastructure?
absolutely, go ahead.
Randy, you might cover this in the foundations report as well, but curious about O'Brien Square. First line item here is about requests for interest. I know last time this was presented to the board, we were kind of left with this big cliffhanger if there was going to be funding or not allocated to it. I'm just curious if you can provide us an update if any progress has been made towards that.
Well, let's see, where to begin. We finished the preliminary report from all of our work, which engaged about 1,000 people and around 60 stakeholders deeply. The property management side of PPR moved ahead with an RFI with a sort of very early version of that report. And I think the RFI, which request for interest, pretty broad, and the deadline I think is the 28th for that. So, but Adina, Lauren, you could probably fill in more deeply on that.
We're still getting admissions as far as I know.
Yeah.
Applications. So there's interest. I know we have more than one.
And I think the hope is to try to identify some partners that are interested in doing operations and incorporate them in the next stage of the design, the interim design. So we're going to make some interim park improvements. It's not like the final full build of the
Right.
park based on the available funding that we have. And so getting the partners involved in that next stage of making some decisions about the interim design elements for the park. So that's what we're hoping to get.
And just like to be, you said it twice, but I'm gonna say interim again, right? Because we don't have enough funding to do the
Right.
full park development yet. So we just want to make sure that it doesn't sit fallow and that, you know, folks are enjoying it and that, you know, can deter any bad behavior.
And the
Some
garage
great
demo is
activation.
underway right now.
Right.
So we're kind of on the clock now for getting, what are those interim design elements?
Right.
Designed, permitted, so we can be ready to go to those since just the demo's done.
I put our preliminary report in the chat.
Oh.
That's great. Thanks, Randy.
And Randy, was that deadline the extended deadline? Because didn't they push
It
it
is,
to
yeah.
the 28th?
Yeah, and I don't remember where they changed the.
It was just a few days
Yeah.
days ago. Last week, I think, we extended it by a week.
Financial
Adina,
sus-
Adina, I do have some additional information. I talked
Okay.
to- I talked to Dylan and it looks like we're gonna have 3 potential submitters. And so that's great. And also wanted to tell the board that if this doesn't work out, which we think actually it will, if it doesn't work out, we are, the Asset and Development Group is at the ready to try and figure out what to do next, working with the foundation and with PSU. So we're gonna do something.
Sounds like everything's in a process right now. Thank you. Any other questions regarding that? All right, financial sustainability working group, any reportings? I know folks didn't need
Mike here today.
yes.
Are there any questions?
Going once? Twice. Thank you. All right, community engagement working group. Any questions? Right, moving along, Parks Levy Oversight Committee report, Paul.
Okay,
You're
I didn't get a report in earlier, but I can give a brief report now. This is more of an overview for our new board members, just to give a little bit of context. So what the PLOC does, the Parks Levy Oversight Committee is 5 community members who meet with PPNR staff quarterly to review progress on the 2020 Parks Operating Levy. This local option levy is applied as a property tax at a rate of 80 cents per thousand of assessed value. It generates about $48 million annually over the 5 years that it's authorized. Purpose of the PLOC is to review levy implementation for adherence to levy goals, fiscal accountability, and transparency. PLOC prepares an annual report. There's been one annual report prepared for the 21-22 fiscal year, and there'll be one forthcoming for the 22-23 fiscal year. I missed the April quarterly meeting because I was out of town on business. So why the PLOC, why the levy and the PLOC are important? They're providing needed services and accountability to the community. So protecting water quality and wildlife habitat, delivering recreational programs, removing financial barriers for low-income households by ending current dependence on recreation fees, enhance maintenance of parks and recreation facilities, expand the urban tree canopy, where today canopy coverage is lower, to improve air and water quality. Provide a higher level of maintenance for our 1.2 million urban trees, and modernize data systems to improve internal efficiency. And lastly, prioritize services for communities of color and households experiencing poverty. And PPNR uses a leveraged funding model, which draws from the general fund first before tapping the levy, because the levy wants to be really used to expand programs rather than service existing programs. And what's next? The PLOC will share its second annual report for fiscal year 22-23 later this summer. 3 members left. I'm glad that Casey is stepping in to be the liaison for the board, and 2 are continuing for the new term. And glad to hear that that's been decided. Any questions?
Great overview.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you for that. I'm also involved in the bond oversight committee, and that's the levy oversight committee. Should there be a parallel, but like, should I be reporting back to the Portland Parks Board for the bond oversight committee, or are they separate and distinct elements that don't need this type of informative review? Just curious, because it's been a few years now. And
I think that's a really good question.
thoughts?
That's something we can definitely wrestle with the second half
Yeah,
of this.
okay.
And we're working through the working groups and as the board, so keep a pin in it
You
and
got
bring
it.
it back
Yeah.
up for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And Paul, is this also a good time to bring up the letter and that?
Sure, if you wanted. So Dr. Corman's referring to, we've been tracking the project, the ODOT I-5 Rose Quarter project, for several years. So this started with prior board members back in 2018, 2019. We commented on the original environmental assessment, which we felt was very deficient in terms of this context. We have some figures that Michelle has that we can pull up as I start this. So ODOT's proposing to cap a section which is I-5 through the Rose Quarter, basically from Albina Willis Park, which is blanking the name of the middle school there, and then south.
Harry Tubman Middle School.
Yes, thank you. And they're proposing some parks in here. Original plan, these are busy streets, wide there in Broadway. And there'd be these sort of leftover spaces that would be park spaces. We just thought that they were not going to be parks that could be activated on a regular basis. There'd be odd spaces, a lot of highway noise and fumes from the vehicles. The other piece was historically, when this was pushed through the Albina neighborhood, it was a huge displacement of the African-American community there. And so there's been a cutoff to the river. And so the idea was adding structural capacity to the cap to allow for structures, for buildings to be included, to have a continuity of the urban fabric rather than just these sort of isolated park spots. So Patty and Jim Owens responded in 2019 during a comment period, official comment period for environmental assessment. There was a supplemental environmental assessment that came out last year. We missed the comment period, but we can still add comments. So we have a draft letter that we'd like the board to review and hopefully approve. Basically encouraging ODOT to continue in the direction they've started, making some improvement. Basically, they've greenwashed it, and we're pushing them further to make it more functional. So that's really where we're coming from.
Thank you. So we do have an ask before us regarding approving the letter. Do we have any questions? I want to open it up for any questions of the board. Alana?
Paul, has there been any conversation with, and I'm now blanking on the group name and I apologize, but the Albina Visioning group about what they want those spaces to be used for? And is there any coordination between our work and their work to make sure that we're not inadvertently speaking out against something that they've actually asked for behind the scenes?
Yeah, good question. We haven't officially had contact with Albina Vision. Way back when there was a
Yeah, we
presentation
had
like 5
Winter.
years ago.
Well, winter came, when did winter come? Remember?
It was within the last 3 years for sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
it was,
so
it was,
yeah, more recently than that, yeah.
yeah, but I mean, we have had contact, but I don't think we haven't been
No follow-up,
continued,
yeah.
yeah. But I do know that, yeah, carry on.
No, thank you for reminding me that it was more recent than I remembered.
All right, so we're good.
I actually have been on the project of the ODOT project for a year, and then also involved with Albina Vision Trust, their work group. And then there was a community kind of workshop report back a couple of weeks ago. I was there. And there has been different parcels, and they're now focusing more on the PPS, so the block first. It seems to be more attainable to move forward, but they're also looking at different ways to work with the community and see what best serve the community. And I'm not sure if the highway path is really on the top priority, but I think the letter, if there's anything, it will be really helpful to have a kind of comprehensive way of tying different groups' conversation together, and not just what are you going to do, what are you going to do? It's how we all work together with the community, so that I think show support of that willingness is very important. What is going to come out of it is going to depend on the collective conversation. I don't think we can just say, oh, that you do this. I don't think that will work.
Thank you. Any, I guess, tension or thought about moving this forward, so based on your comments?
Was
letter.
that circulated amongst the?
It should have been in, everybody should have gotten it in the board packet.
I might have missed it, but
Do
I
we-
would go with all your.
Can it be read out loud or shared? If you want people to vote on it, let's,
Yeah, why don't we take like a minute
Yeah.
or two? Who doesn't have access to the letter?
Michelle's gonna put it up on the screen.
At the very end, but I think it's like the bottom thing of the packet.
The last thing in the packet.
Can I ask you a quick question first?
Of course.
And I followed this project for a while and then I haven't been lately. So I know environmental groups were asking for additional green infrastructure, bioswales, tree canopy, all sorts of greening to offset. Has Parks also been advocating on that front, and or has ODOT been receptive and that's been included in improvements to an adequate level?
Yeah, we've tried to stay mostly in our lane from a parks perspective rather than commenting on sort of PES's territory in terms of stormwater, although I think there's a connection, but we tried to keep it as direct as we could. So we haven't asked for those kinds of green infrastructure additions.
Wouldn't trees be?
Well, trees would be, we didn't specifically address trees, so you can see here what this letter is.
I did see it wasn't in there, but is there like, could trees be in there? If it's not adequate,
Well-
could trees be included as
Well,
an
trees would
extra?
definitely be included as part of the park spaces in this cap, now that it's going to be cap capable of structures. There's more depth that's available for adding urban street trees. So what we're saying here is totally consistent with what you're asking for. We just haven't explicitly asked for it in this letter. So that could be a modification to this letter if that's the desire of the board.
I would say for a major highway project, offset of trees is a very, yeah, I would love that to be included.
So, so make sure we have a note of that so we can add that to the letter, it sounds like. Lauren, did you, is that a legacy hand or did you want to add the conversation?
And so I just wanted to circle back to the question about I-5 coordination and and Albina Vision. There is, BPS is leading a whole committee. There's several bureaus involved in that. They have a charter that they've established to help support Albina Vision and try and link to the I-5, what's going on at I-5 and also what's going on at the Interstate Firehouse Cultural Center to make sure that all of those efforts complement each other and don't compete with each other. It was a little bit slowed down, I would say. They were waiting for the Albina Vision Trust to put together some more documents about like Swen said, about the school site. And so it has been less about the parks part of Albina Vision right now. They're just trying to get their structure in place and get them through the city system, basically. So I just wanted to let you know, but we are involved in those meetings. We do attend those meetings, Brett Horner and I, and we are involved in the early discussions about what will happen with Albina Vision.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Super quick, I think the letter that was attached to the end of the board packet was different than the one that was displayed up there.
in the draft, sorry.
Okay. Can we maybe like push the decision later in the meeting so we have time to read it?
I would like to have everybody read it for like a minute or two, just so so we know what we're looking at and not punt it later. I would love whatever corrections, additions, or anything like that to be said in this meeting, understanding that we can move this forward. Some of this is because Paul's not going to be with us after today. It would be really great to have this move forward. I do have a comment on this regarding maybe having this come to the board so we have a better understanding and also language to say that we want to make sure that we're supporting community. A lot of times, especially with environmental injustices, parks and green spaces are considered to be a luxury and an amenity, and sometimes that ends up at the end of it. And so making sure that this community does have adequate green spaces and parks and trees and bioswales is super important. So I think as we're still working through the process to make sure that we're giving this community the green space that they really need, because historically, formerly redlined areas tend to be the most neglected in our cities.
And Michelle, this version is the version that there was a gap in the second part of the letter. So the version you had up earlier was the complete letter.
Oh, it was. the
Yeah,
complete one?
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to,
So are you saying that the letter that we have in our packet is not the correct letter?
I believe it is not.
Okay.
The signature.
Okay, so since it's not the correct letter, let's go ahead and bring this back till next meeting, which is in July, which is just a couple of weeks.
We're ahead of schedule right now, so if we have the correct letter, we can take 5 minutes to get it out.
Does everybody have the capacity to read it is my question. So Michelle, if you can, let's take 5 and see, Michelle, if you can email it out to
Not
everybody.
everyone has their laptops.
And not everybody has their laptops, and and we don't have a printed out copy. So I'm gonna make a decision, because I am the chair. Already throwing my weight around. If we can get the letter out for the next meeting, which is in July, it's the second Tuesday, which is second Tuesday in July, that we will come back to this letter and make sure that we have the accurate one, everybody's read through it, and then we can vote on it in July. That is what I want to put forward, Director Long.
I think we have enough time for it to be pushed to July. I'm gonna suggest that we add some of the elements that have been discussed
Yes.
to the draft and then send that out instead of just sending it out as it is.
Absolutely, sounds good with those additions. Bonnie, go ahead.
Sorry, what were those elements? Because I wanted to say, is that going to include a bit of a closing that addresses the emphasis on the environmental justice components? Because right now, I mean, I appreciate the work that went into it, but I feel like it just sort of stops with some very specific design suggestions.
I guess what I heard was
Okay.
additional green infrastructure, including trees where feasible, and address
And social justice.
and social justice and ensuring that it's in alignment with the Albina Vision Trust vision for green and open space. That's what I heard.
Yeah, that sounds great. It's my understanding too that like Prosper and others, maybe the bureau that the BPS committee that you've been talking about is developing a community framework agreement for this. So,
I'm not as familiar.
okay, so yeah, it would be great if that could be included in that paragraph.
Wonderful, I'm getting notes on all of this, is that correct?
Yes. David or Paul, did you want to be the ones to write those added elements or? I'm asking David because he's now.
And I'm willing to work with you on the language as well. So it's a team effort for sure to make sure we get across it. Would that work for everybody?
And I'll ask that Lauren just add any language regarding the city's interface and that committee with Albina Vision Trust so that it can be acknowledged that that exists.
Right, and we also have to acknowledge that we're writing it through the position as the Portland Parks Board, so understanding what is in our wheelhouse. And I think you're talking about environmental, EJ environmental injustices as well as social justice within that area is definitely within our wheelhouse. I'm just hoping that we can get a letter together maybe in the next week or so, if we're not going on vacation. In the
Thought
next
you were
week or
done
so.
when you walked out this door.
So
Such luck.
So we can make sure.
Pulling you back in.
I have a letter on my laptop. I could do it during our lunch break.
Yeah, let's do it. We still won't be able to vote on it until
Right.
our meeting in July, but hey, if we can get it done today, let's try to get it done today. And Lauren, I saw that you put your hand down, but I just want to make sure that you had your say. Is there any additions?
No, I just wanted to acknowledge that. I heard what you said, Adina. I'll work with David on that.
Wonderful. So do we have to like do a whole motion to push this forward? Okay. So thank you for your work, and unfortunately, we're gonna ask you to do some more. Randy?
I just wanted to check in on the timing. Is there a deadline?
No, we missed the
Okay.
comment, the official comment
That's what I
period,
was
so at this
worried.
point, it's just, they'll see it and they'll know that we're tracking, but won't be part of the official record.
That's wonderful, and it sounds like it might be time for us to reconnect in some sort of way since the last time you've been in conversation, so something to have on our radar. Great. Thank you so much, Paul. And so we're gonna be moving forward unless there's any more questions or comments to the Portland Parks Foundation report with Randy Brad. Ron.
Sure. Nice to see you all. Sorry, I missed last meeting. Lots been happening. First off, we have our second annual, third, depending on if you count our virtual festival, annual Paseo festival that is, we changed the format this year from a one weekend event to a 3 Sunday event. It's the Sunday vibe was really great last year, super relaxed and we had really good turnout and we just thought that it kind of felt better and everybody involved thought it felt better. So we're going to do a kind of themed evenings, 3 to 6 p.m. on July 16th, 23rd, and 30th. The first one will be around nature and social justice, and that's being curated by Ty Carpenter, who is board chair of Doja Portland and also director of the Black Gallery. And the second one will be jazz and nature, which will be curated by DJ Ambush from the Numbers radio station, actually collaborating with KHMP, which is the first time they've ever collaborated together, which is that's kind of cool. And then the third one will be Indigenous Land Back, and that's being curated by Amanda Stubitz, who did our Indigenous area last year. It was very, very popular, very exciting. And she's really great at bringing all the generations together. So there'll be elders there and young rappers and all kinds of interesting stuff. So like I said, 3 to 6 p.m. on this Sunday. So hope to see you all. It's completely free, very family friendly event. Activities and things like that. And it'll be centered on Szymanski Square this year. We just got done in May with our Friends annual Friends Summit. We had about 150 people there from representing about 70 different groups. Thanks Nina for coming and Todd and everybody else who was there. Commissioner spoke and we gave out some awards. Our annual Parks Champion Awards, which went to some folks working in Pier Park and also the Columbia Slough. And we gave out our second annual Joey Pope Award for Parks Leadership, which was really fun to be able to do it because we also reached our fundraising goal for that. So we now have a $500,000 endowed fund for that and counting. Keep getting more and more contributions. It's named for our founding board chair and also the person who oversaw the parks 2020 master plan some years ago, Joey Pope. Her family helped raise all the money, and the result is this year was one $10,000 grant plus technical assistance, and it went to Black Futures Farm, which is a really wonderful organization in Brentwood, Darlington neighborhood, and it's just a great evening of being able to give out those awards. Let's see, we have a bunch of grants that we're about to give out. They haven't been announced yet. Let's see if I can dig up that. Anyway, that'll be announced in our newsletter coming out in early July. And then, of course, since I last saw you, we finished up the O'Brien Square first report. There's a couple of phases to it because it was the idea we were working with PSU's Center for Public Interest Design and the Harvard Loeb Fellowship. And the idea was to look at interim activations of O'Brien Square and then also look at long-term concept designs. And so the long-term concept designs are still in progress, but the first report, which I put in the chat, is in there. And that was a tremendous engagement effort. 6 webinars and a public survey that went out that 400 people participated in. And we had around that many who came to the old Finnegan's toy store where we set up headquarters. And we just had a great evening, great weekend of events there. And then also 17 design teams from various firms in town worked and tried to, basically distilled all the feedback we got into some concept designs, which then those are being further refined for these concept designs for the future. But also, engaged a lot of people who were interested in interim activation. About 30 arts and culture organizations ranging from OMSI to Black Girl Rising, showed a lot of interest in O'Brien Square. But the sort of big message was safety, because it's had a bad time of it for a long, long time there. And the second thing was it's going to probably take subsidy to do that. And so we hope that there will be some money following on that. Let's see. Thompson Elk Fountain, we cut our deal with the city. So the fountain that was in between Chapman and Lounsdale Squares downtown, just a few blocks from here, that had to be removed during the 2020 protests. And it suffered some damage. Some of it was kind of historic damage, and some of it was the exuberance of the protests. Anyway, it was spirited away by the Water Bureau, and it's been a long road toward bringing it back. We've played a pretty key role, and Commissioner Ryan sort of led the charge in City Council to pass an ordinance wanting to bring it back, but it was overseen by 4 different bureaus, and none of them really wanted anything to do with it. So we commissioned a feasibility study to draw a roadmap and put some money, show what the cost. And then we sort of wrangled everybody together, and Water Bureau ultimately has decided to take the lead on the construction side. But the timetable for bringing it back was so long, we tried to look for ways to shorten that. And so we came up with a unique public-private partnership in which we're completing the contract drawings, because we'd already done 30% for the feasibility study. And then we will gift those to the city. And meantime, Water Bureau will pre-qualify contractors for it, because they still have to go out for an RFP, but they can shorten that process by pre-qualifying folks. It's a pretty unusual thing. There's only a couple companies in town that do anything remotely like that. So that should be able to expedite it by 18 months. And we had to raise about $156,000 to complete those drawings, and we're at 147 right now. So we'll start work on we're already starting work on it, and I'm scraping the last kernels of coins. And then lastly, very exciting, on Saturday, we had a big celebration for the Rose City Playground Project, which has been a project that was started by a group of neighborhood folks for the Rose City Park. Wanting to bring a nicer playground there, and we worked with the Bureau and with then Commissioner Rubio's office to create a public-private partnership there, 50-50 split on the cost of it. And it took a while for us to get there, but we think it's a roadmap to doing other playgrounds. And so we're in the process of selecting the next playground, maybe more than one, see how the donor interest is. But it was really exciting to inaugurate that on Saturday. And so thanks to Dina and her crew, and Lauren and Evan on the capital project side. They had a lot of twists and turns, but we landed the ship, and there were a lot of really happy kids on Saturday. It's fun. So I think that's everything. It's been busy.
Thank you so much, Randy. And opening it up for the board for questions. Sue-Ann, go ahead.
Those, great work. I was lucky enough to be able to attend the event at the Rose City Park Playground. And kids, dogs, old ones, young ones, and even a little girl fell down and on her head bleeding, and 2 rangers right there on the water. There was just that vibe, free pizza. It really has that sense of pride. Not just the people who work on the project, but then the community coming in. That's what it is about. It's just awesome. And thank you for those who work on it, especially the leadership in the foundation. And yeah, more to come. That will be just awesome. Thank you.
And I hope everybody gets to experience that feeling by going out into the parks and going out to events that parks are holding. Bonnie, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for your report, Randy, and really appreciate all the work that the foundation always says. I have a question, following up on Adam's question. I guess Adam went to go fill his water bottle. I'm a little bit confused as to the RFI for O'Brien, and there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect between the work that you and the foundation have done on O'Brien and what's going on with this current RFI, and I'm having a hard time understanding how those are interconnected. Can we get a little bit, maybe this might be a question for, it might be a question for
I think it's more
Adina
of a
and
question
John.
for you guys.
Yeah.
So Randy Parks, PSU, the Loeb Fellows did some great visioning, planning work about potential activations for O'Brien, both shorter term and longer term. There's a lot of concern about the space laying fallow between the time PBOT finishes with the demolition of the garage and the time that we actually have enough funding to redevelop the park. So putting the RFI out was to ensure that we had enough time to identify, select, and work with a partner so that come January, I think, January, I don't know, I think it's January, when PBOT is done, that at least by spring, we have something going on there right away. It doesn't preclude things that, ideas that came out of the work that Randy led. And this is also temporary, right? So we don't know how long O'Brien's been closed for how long? 5 years, 6 years, 5 years? So we don't know how long it's gonna take for us to sort of cover the gap, right? And do the work for the longer term vision. So I don't see that there is a disconnect, except for the fact that I wish we had the funding right away and that we could just go right into a long-term.
Right, so the
plan.
RFI then is,
It's programmatic activation, not.
understand,
Right.
but in terms of, are there resources attached to it? What's going, I guess I don't understand.
So there's some resources. We are looking to do, I want to say like a simple plan, so it would be creating a flat surface substrate. We're talking about stage, we're talking about or not, I should say stage, but like some sort of performance area, lighting. But it's still not going to be a permanent improvement.
That's on the capital side. And the operating side, it's the opportunity to engage, right? Nonprofit and for-profit event folks, whoever in the community cares about O'Brien Square, to organize on the private side to say like, yeah, this is something we care about, we want to invest in with the city. So we're asking the community, say like, who wants to participate in that? And once we see that, we'll make a decision about like how much public resources we need to put into it. We're gonna have to manage the park through like picking up trash, sending park rangers, a base level of service like we have for all downtown squares. And then what else can we partner with, the nonprofit and for-profit community in Portland, philanthropic community, if they want to get involved. So it's a way to activate, non-public resources, see what there is interest out there without like us unilaterally picking winners, right?
Right, so the proposals that are the submissions that are coming out of it are not actual proposals, or are they? Are they?
Well, they're open for whatever the private parties are putting together. It's very wide open RFI. It's an expression of interest. It's not a request for proposals. We didn't say, we shared the information that Randy's team put together that we were involved with. That's linked in there. So we want to use all those best ideas. They're only real ideas if the community, both public and private, operationalize them and invest in them, right? And so that's what we're trying to tease out.
And what is the budget for the interim phase?
We haven't set an operating budget for the site.
We're waiting to see what the
Yeah.
ideas are.
Yeah.
And also, I love the idea that it's an RFI and not an RFP, because it really allows for a little bit more organic thinking. depending on what ideas come up, so it's.
I mean, you can imagine there's some operators out there that only want to operate their ideas in good weather. There's some ideas out there that might be year round, where they'll be more like a farmer's market or something, or food carts. They want to go year round. So there might be different ideas for activation, and maybe they're complementary when they get together. Maybe they'll self-organize, maybe not. That's what we're trying to tease out.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Any other?
it's non-traditional, right? We normally build parks, spend a lot of public resources, like a lot. And then afterthought, engage private sector. So
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
flipping this around a bit because the scarcity of public resources up front to let the private sector decide, be part of the decision process about the design. Normally, we go through a communication process, design the park, build it, and then go out and say, hey, can anyone permit this for events? We're trying to like flip that around a bit.
yeah, I guess, and the reason I'm asking too is because, you know, under normal circumstances, you know, if there's resource available, right, there'd be a NOVA, right? A notice of funding availability for something,
That's right.
right? For developers to come in or for program operators. So I'm kind of trying to understand. But I mean, if you're talking to you said three potential parties who may submit, I mean, that's great. I mean, I guess I'm still trying to understand, you know, in terms of dividing the risk, I mean, it sounds like a good thing. And to ensure that there is community support for whatever comes out of it.
Yeah.
It's just, I'm still having a hard time kind of just, I'm like, hey, but if you got three
Right.
potential submitters,
Right.
great.
And
Like,
if I can jump in.
Sure.
I really appreciate you using the word fallow for the space, because that means there's so many possibilities for different types of cultivation, of programming. And I think particularly with the downtown area and figuring out how to bring it back, allowing for this sort of flex space could be really, really interesting and draw people to it. And I would love to see more opportunities like this at different parks to create it, make it fluid, to have different types of programming. And then also making sure that, because, you know, knock on wood, if we can find it someplace, that, you know, during our heat waves, that, you know, people might want to come out later at night and get their wiggles out after, you know, sheltering in place in 100-degree weather. And so really thinking about what it means to activate our parks at dark, our spaces at dark. So I think this is hopefully a wonderful opportunity to get different type of programming and different community members activating that space. And I love the idea of just showing up. It's what's going on downtown. Let's go and see there and go and hang out. And it sounds like it could possibly be a destination park depending on what happens. And so I appreciate that. And Monty, thank you for all of those questions. I think they're all important. And I see Lauren, did you want to add? And then Todd.
So Bonnie asked about the budget. We have $3 million in SDC set aside and 2.2 from the general fund, the mayor, that we have a little more flexibility in how we use it. So basically we have $5.2 million right now assigned to O'Brien Square.
Thank you.
On the capital side.
The 3 million on the SDCs is for capacity expansion,
Yeah, that's right.
so could not be used for programming.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's all capital.
It's all capital. Yeah.
I was just gonna mention that some of the best models we have are, we do a great job of point in time activation. So think of Summer Free for All, where we show up and we do the movie, or, you know, where we partner and we do the summer playground launch event or the concert. What we need is partners that have a longer term interest that can aggregate all those small events. And we can issue permits out to folks, but it's great to have a Pioneer Courthouse Square or those types of nonprofit entities that can do 300 events on one block in downtown Portland. Like
And
we
like
need
a
more of,
MC for the space.
we need more of those partners. We do a great job out at Gateway Discovery, running it just ourselves with our staff, but we can't do that in every plaza square. We can't afford that with public resources to do that. So we need to find these private partners, nonprofit probably, to aggregate and activate. And we can stitch them together if some of them want just part of the time, so a third of the capacity. And we end up having 3 partners on one block, great. But we're looking for those.
So anybody want to put out any feelers? There's an opportunity there, so thank you so much. Any other questions? Well, thank you so much, Randy. And then we're gonna move to, looks like Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland discussion, and I believe Todd, you're gonna be guiding us through that.
So for those of you that don't have a laptop, I brought some copies, but for those of you that do have a laptop, if you could go to the link, you see I posted, there's a Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland link, bring that up. Else, or whatever, anyone else, I might have some extras, prefer to look at the hard copy. Yeah, it's kind of fun to look.
Yeah.
at.
It's also on the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland website, if you want to go to the parks website.
2 more hard copies, it's kind of fun.
I'll take a hard copy.
Sure.
I sort of.
I'm gonna set that for- Things in print.
Right, so I'm gonna give a little background because we have new Parks Board members here. This time, we have about an hour for this, I think. It's really discussion time for all of you, so I'm hopefully facilitating a discussion here, less than a presentation. Some of you might not have had a chance to read this, so I'll do an orientation of the document and what's in here, its purpose at the beginning here, but then the rest of the time really want to talk about how, as individual board members, how you might be able to engage with Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland over the coming year. And this might go into afternoon discussions, kind of seed ideas for you in the afternoon discussions about maybe some of the work that we cover here today and look at. You might want to have in committee meetings, and some of the materials or topics which we discuss there, or highlight items where you'd want kind of staff to bring things back to the full board presentation or format discussion. So kind of looking for different ways around how the Parks Board can both kind of learn about information and things that we're working on in Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, or maybe be part of a co-design process. And I've got some ideas around that through the upcoming year around Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland. Just background for new board members. We had some foundational documents over the last 20 years. One of them was our Vision 2020 document that was really important for the organization at that time. It actually, the folks that were around back then, they started the Parks Board and the Portland Parks Foundation at that time. So it was really this kind of like reset of like, kind of how do we grow up as a parks agency in some ways. And so that served us well for 20 years. We had also kind of a whole collection of different plans and studies. We had a racial equity plan. We had a 3-year strategy. The challenge for kind of the organization and for the community was like, you had this long list of all these plans, like which ones are we supposed to prioritize? How do we engage the community? How do we invite the community in to be part of like decision-making and informing the Bureau of what they should do next? Because like first you'd have to sit down and read a library of plans. Or if you read one plan, it would be conflicting with another plan. So the idea of Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland is to bring it back as more of an iterative planning process where we're on an annual cycle of listening and learning with the community and our employees, and that our strategy rolls on over time. We will have multi-year goals that you'll see in the document and you'll learn over the coming year around different strategic actions we're taking. We have a new mission, vision, value statement that was just printed last week. It's been worked on the last couple of years with Parks Board members and community as part of a co-design team. We had a co-design team that was part of what we call our action results, which is kind of the more think about strategic actions and performance management of how we do that. We created a decision support tool that's this tool that helps operationalize our equity and anti-racism work in the Bureau, and really like 7 principles of good design and how we assess our decision-making. We've incorporated that into our budget process. So if you read this, you'll get a sense of the summary of that work the last 2 years. What's in here is our new mission, vision, values statement, and then also our working draft of our strategy with 6 outcomes. I'm going to share my screen here so we can kick this off. Share my screen.
Say you picked some really beautiful images. Really beautiful. There it is.
I just wanted to get the table of contents up here so we get a sense for what's all in this document. I want to first just start off of kind of maybe different individual ways to participate around listening and learning. So listening and learning is our community engagement process that we're involved in. We have a variety of different ways Parks Board members can participate in, like when we're doing a new parks design, you can get on community engagement, a body for that. We have renaming of parks periodically. So, that's another opportunity. But for listening and learning for Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, this summer, Director Long mentioned this, we're going out to the community and centering underserved Portlanders that historically haven't had good access or faced barriers to our park system, and learning about what they would like to do for their recreation, kind of starting high level, and then what we offer and how they're interacting with those services, what barriers they're facing, what they're enjoying. Going through a process of both going out and doing tabling. We're also doing kind of curated community events where we're serving kind of picnic lunches or going to community partner organizations. So we'll be at the Rosewood Initiative, and we're going to do it at their facility. We're facilitating kind of, it's like a resource fair. So you're going to be able to learn about park services, sign up for access passes, learn about the jobs we offer, but also have a conversation about recreation of what, how we can get better as an organization to serve communities' needs. So we'll be doing some trainings here in the next month. And if Parks Board members, for instance, wanted to participate in going out to one of those tabling events and participate in one of those community events, I think that could be discussed at our what's our community engagement committee? What are we calling it?
Yes.
Is that the name?
Yep.
The Community Engagement Committee. So maybe that would be something that we could discuss this afternoon, of like having a sign up for board members to participate in that. And all of those things are staffed by park staff. So really you'd be kind of additive to a successful interaction. So you wouldn't be like mission critical. So I think that's a little more fun and less stressful for board members. So you can kind of show up. And then some of the tabling stuff where we might be there all day, you can just show up for an hour and just be part of getting the vibe of how it's going. And then also like thanking our staff, little plug, for, the work that they're doing to try to engage the community would be great. So that's just like one idea of how the board could participate. So I'm going to set aside listening and learning for a second, and then maybe we can have a discussion about, if you want to look in the document, we have these outcome areas, 6 of them, and that's really how we're trying to report on the impact that we're having in the community. And then maybe I'll direct you to a page so we can all look at it together. So if you go to page 16, you can see here's all of our 6 outcome statements, right? Those are, think about it as like chapters in this document of how we're reporting on our results. And then if you flip to page 23, you can see an example of how it lays out in the document. So we've got our outcome category of accessible, safe, clean, well-maintained public spaces. and these goals basically of what we're committing to the community of what we're striving for. And in the document, you'll see examples of kind of strategic actions we're facing or some conceptual information of barriers that we're seeing or where we're falling short, kind of a brief assessment. But we can go way deeper on all of these. This is like, we wanted to keep this to 40 pages and ended up being 52 with lots of beautiful photos. So, but the opportunity here, I think, is, you know, where does the Parks Board want to spend some time in the coming year of going deeper or having conversations with us? And it could be in a variety of different ways about learning what are the strategic actions that you're taking to, you know, have accessible, safe, clean, well-maintained spaces. How are you measuring that, your performance on that? So we have performance metrics that go along with our strategic actions. In some cases, we're doing that really well. Other cases, we're not doing that so well. And so if any of you had like an interest or an expertise in one of those areas, it'd be like, oh, there's actually this indicator, you know, there's something you could co-design with us and work with our performance management team. So these are like opportunities for us to discuss, yes.
Do you ever do a community assessment where the community themselves do a survey?
Yes, thank you.
Nice.
It's almost like
It's like a,
we-
it's like a
yeah.
pitching the
So that's
softball.
So one of our,
It wasn't planned. It
one
wasn't
of our offerings, so we're partnering with Portland State University to do a community survey. We, Sarah Huggins and Jason Smith they're gonna be leading that work. We'd love it if there were a couple Parks Board members that want to participate in that process. And again, it would be working with community and park staff, design the survey, and then inform how we're going to roll out that survey and go through that process. And just look at my notes here. So we're looking at 2 to 4 meetings over the next 6 to 9 months. And those meetings would last probably about an hour and a half. And again, I can send this out in the notes as like invitations, but that, for instance,
That
that's.
would be great.
I'm interested.
Yeah.
And I just email. I'm
So
interested.
I have a Google sheet. And this is gonna be, you're gonna hear this over and over again, from where you can sign up for these things. So that way we can make sure we don't hit quorum, which I hope we have that problem with engagement. Like there's too many board members. With that said, do you have a capacity hearing for board members during this process?
Do we have, sorry,
Like how many board members would you be able to take on for this process? Just making sure.
For the
No, I don't
community
thi- I don't
survey.
think we limited the number. Yeah, I
So
don't-
just as long as we don't reach quorum. we're
yeah, I
fine.
think that's right. Yeah, for the PSU survey one, it's kind of defined work, certain set meetings. Yeah, and then of course, that would probably be optional, but you could be part of the implementation too. It'd be kind of fun to go out, be part of the survey process for some people.
If you
depending
can
on your
send
time.
that out, that information out to Alana and I, that's
Sure.
great.
I've got a kind of a list of ideas here that.
Perfect.
Great, so that's one. Maybe to go back like topically, if anyone wants to discuss any of these more or think about how we might think about putting them into like committee work or ad hoc work groups or bring us to the full board. I'll just mention for the new members, we have all city bureaus have something called a budget advisory committee. And we made the decision last year basically to center that on our financial sustainability working group committee. That's a committee of the board. And normally that's 3 to 4 meetings between November and January for that committee. And one of the things that happens as part of that process is we do our annual reporting of our performance metrics that are the highest ones for the bureau that go into the budget. So like one of those meetings is about performance management, but it's just kind of the highest 35 metrics that go into the budget itself. So that's an opportunity where, you know, we could go deeper, keep that, you know, at the financial sustainability working group, or maybe that's something we should be bringing to the full board to talk about kind of the performance. A lot of the budget stuff is a lot of numbers, which I don't know if that needs to be at the full board, but the performance management side maybe that should be coming to the full board.
Opening up the floor. Chris, go ahead.
I think some of these values would be really helpful to have just on the standing agenda item, like agenda working group agendas or kind of formatting, especially I'm thinking in particular for the community engagement, and I'm not even on these working groups, and land use and infrastructure, in what we're striving for of people having a variety of parks and recreation experiences of where they live, even looking at the data points of 69.4% of East Portland households have 0.5 mile access to a park or natural area, and like what that would do to increase access to 71% in the areas that are under development. And when we're looking at other areas that are under development, and for the land use and infrastructure, like in particular projects that are under development, if you could look at sub parks or like pools, like for Northgate Park, like what does that change for access for certain pools and access to populations? Like, are we looking at that percentages? And like, do we want to look in percentages of for just benefit for walkability to the citywide average? Like, what would it take for us to get to that number to 100% across, and looking at those data metrics across working groups and having those conversations in our working groups to just have them as kind of like talking points to keep that front and center on our working group templates, I think would help us center the work and like what we're striving for when we meet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the opportunity. And we need to hear from you to tell us, there's too much stuff, right, for us just to push it your way. So we're looking for exactly what you just said. If we want to do like park access, for instance.
Because that focuses on equity, right?
That's
Like
right.
what we want.
And we have lots of good data where we could take a subcommittee or the full board and show like, we have maps of all the experiences of different amenities. You can see a heat map. We know that for East Portland, if we want to bring it up to the same level of the rest of the city, we need to build 13 parks and it'll cost about $300 million. Like, we have these little factoids across this whole thing. We're looking for you to tell us like, yeah, let's have the land use committee track that, and then our team can staff that appropriately. Yeah.
So we're operationalizing it, and we want you to help us advise us, right? And also so that we can inform you appropriately as well.
Cool. So huge caveat. This is like not a fully formed idea because it's my first time seeing this. It's half a question for Todd, half a question just for sort of the general board. I think that one of the things that I've admired most about this body is the different opinions that we bring to really specific issues. When we have the opportunity to discuss them and we go really deep. I've always loved that. I think one of our biggest challenges is tracking everything. It's like, how do we keep our eyes on everything at all times? So sort of where my brain immediately went sort of systemically is, if these are the outcomes on page 15, these general buckets that the Parks Department is striving for, would it make sense for our subcommittee formation to be informed by that, to align with that, to connect to it, something like that?
We're gonna do that this afternoon.
Okay.
I'm just so happy that this is steering in the right direction.
Yes.
But yeah, definitely. I think these are the conversations that we need to have, and because we do have this opportunity of this retreat, we're gonna have an hour and a half dedicated to park board conversations and an hour and a half dedicated to working group conversations.
Sorry to spoil it.
Awesome. It just kind of reaffirming that we're moving in the right direction. Yeah.
It's all coming together.
And one thing that I would love to see, and this is from some of the work that I worked with Linda Robinson on Gateway Green, is
do we have projections of the multifamily units that are going to be entering or be completed in these spaces? Because one of the, I'll just, a little nugget of information is that a lot of homeowners that had backyards use parks very differently and saw a need very differently than the folks that are coming in the multifamily units that don't have a balcony, don't have a backyard. And so you're gonna probably feel a lot more pressure with, population rise and with that population not necessarily having a traditional home. So how are we thinking through accommodating the community that we already have, and then the community, how are we welcoming the community members that are coming into our park system and making sure that we have adequate nature spaces, recreation centers, amenities? So how are we thinking through that?
So that's a great idea. And like our PSU survey, for instance, right, when we're collecting demographic information, not just household size, but maybe also like type of household dwelling, multifamily versus single family. That would be, we've done a lot of, I feel like we have a lot of demographic information on age, income, race and ethnicity. But dwelling unit, I think we haven't been tracking. So when we talk about, who participates in programs, we're using those other demographics, but not household.
Yeah, along with the ADU units that are gonna probably
Right,
start
it's a
taking
great
up
idea.
people's backyards. And so the idea of, the sort of personal private type park that came in during the suburban era. in the
Someone
90s.
else probably knows, but I feel like we tipped over 50% of renters in the city of Portland.
And I think it's just gonna rise from that
Yeah.
point on. So something definitely to think about. So let me know, correct me if I'm wrong. I think Alana, Bonnie, and then Director Long. Is this all
I know
going on in
I'm
the same conversation?
I'm building on what you said because
Okay.
I've had
Alana, go
a
ahead.
question for a meeting or two now, but there hasn't been a good place to ask it and you kind of just teed it up. Which is, as we have increasing density in Portland, has there been any conversation about the metrics that we are using and this idea that people should be within a half a mile of a park, things like that? Because yes, that is still the right walking distance to get to a park, but the amount of people that are then using those resources is going to grow exponentially in Portland over the next few years. And are we thinking about, as development increases and even folks who have private parks in their backyards have much smaller parks because of ADUs and things like that? Are we thinking more about pocket parks? Are we thinking more about parks closer together? Or are we really letting that density happen and focusing more on the large parks that have been in development lately?
Can I jump in? Just one thing, walk and roll and understanding that our community members are going to be able to get to the park in different ways, making sure we're accommodating that. So maybe safe routes to parks would be.
We don't have to answer all these now, right?
No, but
But
to
like,
think about
so, and then the
as-
question is, where do we want to discuss that in the coming year? So yes, of course, we want to talk about that. So then do we want that in the land use committee? Do we want that to come to the full board? Do we want, because, right, of course, we should be talking about that, right? And then the opportunity with the iterative planning is not to criticize the people that did the work for Vision 2020, but we're not locking this down for 20 years.
Right.
Our hope is we're gonna come back, in the fall of 2024 with an update to this. And so where we can highlight and have community engagement to add something to this, be like, we didn't highlight density enough in this. That's the opportunity then in the fall of 2024 of Parks Board through community engagement, PSU surveys, like we know multifamily renters are driving our growth in our community. We need to think about parks differently. That's the opportunity.
And throwing this out there, think about public parks and public housing together would be great. Are you gonna dovetail off this conversation or are you starting a new one?
Well, First, I'm gonna respond to that because Paul has been giving me all these looks, because for the last 5 years, as he and Patty and I have been involved in the level of service analysis, that has been my mantra, has been about the density, given the fact that, and we were using the community centers as an example. Because with the 2-mile radius for a community center, well, that's all really great, but if you still can't get a swim lane, if you can't get in a class, if you can't get, if there's no capacity because there are, twice as many people using that community center as it was designed for, you're still not served. So so I appreciate this and want to say it's not a new thing and it's been something we're talking about. But I also want to kind of raise it also in the context of this generally, right? I mean, I love some of the stuff that's been on here. I love the focus on the youth programming. I love the focus on the overall mental, emotional, physical wellness. But I also want to sort of point out that, this does draw some attention on some of those potential deficiencies as well. And I think we need to think a little bit more comprehensively about things like, you mentioned specifically the garden plots, the 2,700 garden plots, which are lovely and wonderful. And the fact that there are 2,000 people on the waiting list, which is 2 years, right? So what are those people? Yes, I might be within a half mile or mile from a community garden, but if I still have to wait 2 years to get a spot there. And for my garden plot, the one that's closest to me, it might be much more than 2 years, right? So, and people are not fungible. So we need to think about how are we addressing that. I also wanted to sort of point out, I really appreciate this focus on the Youth Force program. I love it. But I also had questions because these numbers here, the highlight is on page 32 and 33. You highlight the former NBA Rookie of the Year, Damon Stoudemire, who I went to high school with, and the Teen Force program. These numbers are interesting to me, but I also think they're confusing and a little bit misleading, truthfully. You talk about the 1,900, 500 swim lesson registrations, and I'm assuming that those are if I am a 7-year-old swim registrant and I've signed up for Penguin and Seal and whatever, am I one registrant or are those separate registrations?
These are registrations.
So those are separate
multiple.
registrations. And the same thing with the Teen Force Pass. I'm thinking these are not passes scanned, which would suggest individual people's, but I'm assuming this is because it's 22,700 and there's only
Those are visits.
yeah, so they're visits, because I mean, there's only 14,000
Right.
teens
Yes.
in Portland. So so I think it would be interesting to see how many people and the number of scans, so we can get a sense of what's going on there, because we're also interested in more fully engaging the Teen Force folks, whether it's through an advisory committee to be more integrally involved in developing their programming, right? Or being involved in some advisory capacity to what's going on either through this board or some other. So it would be really exciting and fun to do that. So I think that could use a little bit more clarity there.
It's great.
But it's great. Thank you.
We have that data.
Well,
It's
and-
just sort of
and I
like,
think the
it's just sort of
question-
like what to put in a report and
And-
how to keep it,
And like looking backwards, that would maybe show up at a FYSIWIG meeting around annual budget, or it might come to a full Parks Board meeting, but like we don't have a place for recreation at the committee level really to bring items. So like that's kind of one of the questions, right? Is we could do that at a full board meeting, or where should it go?
Yeah, and that's one of the topics that I know that Corbin and Alana want to get at, is we've talked about the fact that, recreation, it doesn't fit in the current working structure group, and thinking about, because it's such an important component, right, that recreation programming, and what's the right place for it, and thinking about the scope of what the working group should cover and where that should go, whether it's through one of our existing working groups or some rework of that structure.
I'm gonna go with Suen and then to Adam.
this is on a very high level. When, again, it's great effort and report, a document, it's not report, it's a document, working document. How is Woodland Park's effort is also communicating with either planning, say, planning group or PBOT, because there's a lot of kind of overlapping interests, right? And so that's one level, because I think a little bit more communication between the viewers, maybe there's a little bit more empathy with each part's kind of like needs and respectful kind of collaboration and shared vision. Then coming down to the very nitty-gritty detail, I saw 3 dog owners in the central east side area. There are no parks there that is close by. It's more gas station, storefront, banks. So where do they walk the dogs? The parks are where Key Bank's parking lot. There's a little island of grass, dry grass. And it dawned on us that for those of us actually have access to a park or planting strip or in the residential area with the yard, there are people that love their dogs, but that's not seem to be very friendly or user-friendly to the dog and the dog owners. And then that's the question, is like, okay, is this part of Portland Bureau of Transportation's work, or is it Portland Parks? Where does it come? And what about the whole planning Bureau's perspective? And is there an ongoing conversation like that, or are we so focused on the parks issues that we have to power through that level? Is it something the board can bridge some conversation, or what can we do to make it even more comprehensive?
I can speak to that. We work extensively with the other bureaus in many different areas. We have a check-in directly with the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. I go to an infrastructure bureau directors meeting. We have a planning directors meeting. We have a development directors meeting. It really is quite a bit of sort of my body of work. And Lauren McGuire, our assets and development manager, and her team work very closely with all of the other infrastructure bureaus in planning. And there are citywide plans. There are plans that are specific to PBOT that we are a part of and help to inform, et cetera, et cetera. So it happens a lot. There's always room for improvement. We envision that through this government transition and city reorganization, the hope is to create a system that's even better and more efficient and more collaborative. So it's happening by hook or by crook. It's a lot of meetings. It's a little messy, right? But I think it's going to get even better. So it is happening. And I think when we bring things to the board where we require advocacy, often it's because we're either at an impasse, right? Or there's a question about what's going to take priority. And so we do bring things to the board for those purposes. But generally, believe me, you don't want to get involved in that.
We just want to support you.
But I appreciate that. And I appreciate that as well. Thank you. And then just to I just want to mention that while we do have the level of service work and it's ongoing work and it's obviously going to evolve as the city evolves, there is a finite amount of land for us to acquire. So like closing that gap in East Portland, 13 parks. I mean, never mind the 300 million price tag, that alone, but finding land to close that gap as we become more dense city. That's the challenge that I see. So I'm just putting that out there, like, I think we know the problem and we know the solution. It's just sort of getting there. That is gonna be evade us. And so regardless of how much more dense the city becomes, if we can't actually increase our capacity, then we can't increase capacity. And that's challenging. But we're always looking for stuff to buy.
I think you mentioned it just for new board members. The change of government, I think, is going to be pretty substantial and who the ultimate decision-making authority is. So we're going from commissioner form of government where our chief executive is an elected official to the chief executive being the city administrator who reports to the mayor. And so some of the dynamic we have, even though we have a lot of kind of bureau to bureau working relationship, it's sliced down 5 different ways because of the political leadership we currently have. And so that goes away in January 2025, and we all go up to a single point, which is the city administrator and the mayor. And so that's a big change in how this body works, thinking about how it does advocacy and different things, because there'll be 12 elected officials over here on the policy side and 1 on the executive side.
Adam.
I promise this is my last one for a little while.
No, don't.
I've been talking quite a bit. So this connects pretty closely to what Bonnie was saying about participation metrics, how we're tracking all of that. Seems like we've got pretty good mechanisms to track usage, rentals, programming, event attendance, things like that. I'm really curious about how we're thinking about recreation beyond that and thinking about measuring knowledge of access, but also knowledge of occupancy. And so what I mean by that is, just use a personal example. I can't count the number of times I've been kicked off a field because some team has a reservation. I've also seen it where I've had a field reservation for a team that I was coaching, and I've let random kids use the other half, and then another group kicks them off and says they have the reservation. And then I've had to go over and be like, you don't have the reservation, I have the reservation. And I can show you, and I can show you the permit, and so what I want us to sort of challenge measurements in this to think about is how are we letting people know that the field could be there? So I could talk a lot about belonging, talk a lot about access. And so I think sort of on a low end pragmatic fix to that is a citywide directory of when fields are reserved. And it could be as simple as this field is not available type thing. Whereas if I show up to a field and I know there's not a reservation there, I at least have the opportunity to ask people hey, can I join your pickup basketball game? Can I join your soccer game? And so again, lower lift that, and higher lift for our board is rethinking about what recreation actually is and how we can provide opportunities for people to access those spaces. So again, I think a kind of connected example is how we would measure skate park usage. It's very rare that a skate park is rented out. It's how do we know that those spaces are used? We can apply that same methodology for everything.
And unfortunately, coming from the Bay Area, coming from the Bay Area, seen a lot of antagonisms between the digital registry versus people and their cultural practices and uses. And so thinking up through a way of a sort of low tech and not making it completely digitized to the point that you can't get a use of it because you don't have access or you have to have a permit or something like that. So thank you for bringing that up. Ally.
Yeah, just a comment about wildlife in this report. So in my 2 years at Parks, wildlife have felt more like a trickle down beneficiary, right? We talk a lot about plants, we talk, planting, we talk a lot about green space and prioritizing those, but the challenges wildlife face are more than that, especially with parks. And as things become more dense, right, coexistence becomes harder. How people are understanding their wild neighbors, what wildlife disturbance looks like with dogs, what it means to actually coexist well. And I've never really seen that as a as a strategy in parks, but it would go with healthy ecosystems and climate change resilience. And I would really love, you know, I say this, wildlife use parks more than anybody, right? It's their home, they're living there, they depend on it for survival. You know, cities were traditionally built on very biodiverse areas. We are sharing the landscape. So what would it mean in reports like this and for parks in general to not have wildlife be a trickle down beneficiary of, you know, healthy ecosystems, but lifting it more to say, what does it mean to live with wildlife? What does it mean to be a good neighbor? What does it mean to share parks and space? And there's a lot of education that can go with that. There's a lot of signage that can go with that. Some parks do it well, talking about who lives there, like Powell Butte, and some don't do it at all. But they're there regardless. So just a thought on lifting wildlife in the narrative, especially when we're talking about ecosystems.
Thank you, Ally, that's super important. Any other thoughts? Comments?
So I feel like I'm repeating myself a little bit. These are great ideas, like Ally just had one. The question that I'm just grappling with is, where does that go then? You know?
Happy
like-
to help.
No, I don't, no, not just you individually,
Yeah.
but as a board.
Yeah.
Does that go, does kind of how we're responding to that, you know, performance area? Does that go to land use committee? Do we have a new committee that's focused on nature and ecosystems and biodiversity? Where does that go, right? Or is that such a high priority for the whole board that we spend a lot of time in this room at full board meetings, you know, getting presentations and having discussions? You only can do so much of that on so many different topics, right? So that's what we're looking for, is your guidance as a group, like where that goes. I know that's what you want to do this afternoon, because like, I think all of these are great topics. We have staff. This is what their professions are. They would love to just continue to like profile their work, and we're looking for your guidance, right?
Wonderful. And I think one thing that we're trying to do and moving forward with is that making sure that there's an ask of us as the board, so we know exactly how we need to show up and what information we need to provide. So as we move forward with this, let's say if you report back, like what's the ask, what section are we going to be focusing on, and that way we can do a feedback
Totally. And
informational sort of report in
as
the
we're,
future.
as we're able to do, like, look out, let's just say a year, we can find the richest experiences in the coming year. It's harder when you're like, oh, that idea that Ally just had, it's great. If you made us do it next month, it might be just a presentation, but if it was the next year, oh, well, we're doing like some biodiversity surveys in Forest Park, or we're doing some other work with partners, like, then that could be richer experiences or ways that you could influence or co-create with staff.
I think that's a great idea. And I love the idea of like not half-baked, but ideas or if you're in the process, I'm really using this board as a way of vetting and exchanging ideas before it gets to the survey piece. And so maybe thinking about what is preliminary, what, you know, what is a midway check-in or a couple midway check-ins, and then what is a sort of conclusion wrap-up report of the process. But again, a lot of this is still in the making. I really need to get the feedback from the full board on how we want to move forward with these things. So I appreciate that. I saw Linda and I saw Ally. Are we okay?
I put it down.
Okay.
Sorry.
Just like quick response to Ally's comment. Yes, that's where it lives in the report. And yes, the report is really like a snapshot. I mean, you know how extensive and complex our work is. And agree that that work, that body of work could be more elevated. There's a lot of things that eclipse you know, our work around ecological restoration and supporting you know, native habitat. But that work is happening. And so it's not for lack of it not happening, but what I'm hearing from you, and correct me if I'm wrong, is making sure that it's embedded in our philosophy and our approach and how we're talking about parks, not so much the actual sort of work, because the work's happening. We're just not talking about it as much. So just, I just want to acknowledge that I'm hearing you, and I'll say, like, Jen Cairo right over my right shoulder here, has really helped the Bureau think a little bit more holistically around urban forest and tree canopy. And it's really been something that she's elevated in our consciousness, so like, and much more so than ever before. Like, we want to make sure that we're seeing that in everything that we produce. The wildlife piece is definitely a part of it. I know that we've got ecologists and bot specs who, like, they're doing salamander counts and, like, it's happening, but maybe we need to talk about it a little bit more. So, sorry.
Just want to agree. I mean, the work is happening and that's great. And I agree. It's also doesn't, in my experience, I haven't seen it elevated to like how it shows up in written reports, how it shows up and how Parks talks about spaces, how it connects to how the public uses parks.
Yeah.
So those, I think, are the
All
areas
good-
where I
all
look.
good points. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Any other questions or comments before we move forward?
If we talk about working groups and possible climate resilience and climate justice, I think it would be a really great opportunity to then bring in talking about healthy parks and healthy Portland and elevating the healthy ecosystems and climate change resilience and bringing in our urban forestry and biodiversity and elevating that work into just that equitable outcomes in the work. And I think that's a really clear avenue in which to elevate the work and the intersections that Portland Parks and Recreation is doing, but also that Metro is doing, and the intersections of those two. Just wanted to elevate that, bring that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Marissa. Yeah. Any other questions? Anything else, Todd?
I just noted that I had 4 different ideas coming into this conversation that I put in the chat if you want to grab for this afternoon. And then the dates and some of the training opportunities for community engagement this summer, which we sent to the community engagement group. I just put in the chat, so it's up there.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, I think we're concluding this portion and moving on to the Board Affairs Working Group, intro board duties and new language, PC.
Thank
You
you.
are up.
Just a short history for folks. Way back in 1999, 2000, the city developed the 2020 Park Vision, which was really the guiding light for parks for the next 20 years in terms of how parks should look like in 2020. As part of that, the city developed us, the Parks Board, to basically be an advisory group, an advocacy group, and also a place to monitor how successful the city was and its bureaus were into getting to the 2020 vision plan. The 2020 vision plan is now passed. As part of that, the Parks has developed Healthy Parks in Portland. But the codification of the board and its purpose in the city code still keeps or still has the reference to the 2020 vision plan as its guiding light. And obviously we're past that. About 2.5 years ago, when the Board Affairs Working Group was formed, they started thinking about what, how should we change our purpose in order to reflect that we're now past the 2020 vision as the guiding light. And that was kind of put aside for a while to allow parks to develop Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland, but really started to pick up steam late last fall, early last summer, and early fall. Part of that, the Board Affairs Working Group started to look at a possible new purpose statement as well as possible restatement of duties for it. And I would say that it has gone through multiple conversations and has had input from every single person that has been on or is on the Board Affairs Working Group. We have brought this, I think this is the 3rd time we've actually brought it to the full board. We've only asked for a review and input, but this time the Board of Affairs Working Group has felt that we're at a point where we can press the board to take a look at it, vote on it. Both the purpose statement as well as the revisions to the board duties. And so it can move on from here. We think it reflects where the board actually is, as well as a little bit of where we want to be. It's a little bit of both. And just to remind people, we don't approve this. It is a change to the city code. The best we can do is to vote to ask the city council to amend the city code to have it take effect, the changes take effect. So what we are asking, the Board of Affairs Working Group is asking, is that the board vote to recommend to city council that it change the city code to reflect this. And it's very possible in this present climate that they won't even look at it. I mean, with the city charter changes, you know, and I don't know what's gonna happen with advisory groups as part of the city charter changes. It may just get buried somewhere. But I think it's incumbent upon us to at least tell them, we're still out here. We think it needs to change. And these are the changes that we're recommending. I want to thank everybody on the Board of Affairs Working Group. This has been a long road to get here. As I say, there's been input by everybody. And before I bring this forward, does anybody on the Board of Affairs Working Group have any additions they want to make to my comments?
Thank you for leading the charge.
And I guess either chair can ask or I can ask for a motion to approve the revised purpose statement and board duties and recommend the city council make the changes accordingly. I've made a motion.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Wonderful. All those in favor of voting on behalf of moving this forward to council for a vote, hopefully? Is that unanimous?
I don't see Aaron.
Aaron's abstaining.
Erin had to,
But it looks.
she had to be right back.
So it looks like this is moving forward. So
Great.
thank you so much, Casey,
Thank you,
for your
Courtney.
work on this along with the Board of Affairs Working Group. Bonnie, go ahead.
I just want to, again, give more kudos to Casey and the Board of Affairs Working Group. This is one of those things where we knew we had to do this because of the sunsetting of the Parks 2020 plan, but we wanted to hold off until the Healthy Parks, Healthy Portland process was well underway, because we wanted to ensure that the new mission vision for the Bureau dovetailed with what the board was doing. And so it was really kind of we were like, well, hurry up and wait kind of thing. And I just really appreciate the work that Casey and the Board of Affairs Working Group put to ensure that we can have a vision that provides both a North Star for the board as a body, but also fits really well with what the Bureau is doing. So thank you.
And Director Long, would you let us know, like, the process as well? I want you to also talk about it.
Yes, so I think once the board just voted, but we can then share the language. I think we have to share it with Commissioner Ryan first. And then we can move forward to getting it on an agenda for a future city council meeting. I'm just gonna add this and ask for permission if it is so. Commissioner Ryan is now known as the Commissioner for Culture and Livability. He has not been referring to himself as the Parks Commissioner. The language in the purpose statement says Parks Commissioner. So here's my question. If we share this with him and he asks for that amendment, would the board be amenable to us moving forward with that, just that language change? So that we don't need to come back?
I just want to point out that the reference now is the city commissioner in charge of parks. That's how. it's
Got
written.
it. Okay, I think
Yeah,
I read
so it's
something
broad
further down.
enough
Got it.
to-
I think,
Yeah.
and we had made that change based on that feedback.
I don't know, I just opened it and I thought I saw.
Yeah, the term is used as a definition, and I can certainly change the
No,
definition.
that's fine. No,
Yeah.
thank you for that. When I read it on the revised. Yes, you have city commissioner in charge of parks and recreation,
And it's defined as.
parks commissioner. Okay,
So any bitter advertising.
I think it's fine.
Change.
Thank you for making that change. I guess I missed that. I'm just concerned that he, if he might get hung up on that.
Director, I think that it actually is in there and we didn't change it on number 5 of the revised board duties.
So maybe that's what I was
So
looking
I
at.
think that in the upfront places, it's correct.
But
we should
further down,
probably
it's not.
Include in our motion the ability to make a change in
If needed,
revised duties
Okay.
number 5.
but I'll note that number 1 has the definition.
Yes,
Yeah, so it carries down.
yes.
I'm just an old lawyer here.
We have to balance the legal with the perception
All right,
here.
fair enough.
Okay,
And
thank
when-
you.
and when
I
the-
just wanted to add that. And so,
Yeah,
yeah,
thank you.
that's the,
I would love to include Elena and myself on this meeting with Commissioner Ryan if possible regarding this. So keep us in the loop, that'd be great. Nicely done.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
maybe we could cover it on the same.
Wow, okay, so we have pretty much ended pretty early, a couple minutes early. So I'm gonna open it up to public comments. Do we have anybody here for public comment? All right, and is there any new business? Anybody against concluding the board meeting?
One quick thing, I
Yes.
did revise the letter and sent it to.
Well done, Paul.
So if everybody's okay, if we can take about like 5 minutes to
Read that.
look at that.
Yeah.
Michelle, can you do us a favor of emailing it to those on the board?
Michelle,
and
maybe you
I'll
can
put
put it up on the screen for folks who don't have their laptops.
First, that'd be great.
Anyone wants a closer version, I'm happy to share. Laptop.
Alright, so we're gonna take a bit of a reading recess. And look at this. Thank you so much, Michelle.
Was Michelle, I was gonna say, was Michelle included on the email?
Well, I'm gonna go.
My
breakfast.
That's your first lunch.
This is
My first breakfast.
First breakfast.
Are you a runner?
Water and coffee, so.
I'm kind of surprised it's taking this.
Michelle is like in the 21st century. Thank you.
It's
Just
not
gonna
allowed,
focus on
it's
your
on its own sandwich.
stuff.
I actually do this on
I do the hybrid meeting stuff on
Very
another board
cool.
that I do, so it's like practice building on top of each other. It's
I already see a typo, so.
Let me forward.
We can
Just
always
maybe not
like,
go
you know,
through this.
correct
real
it.
time.
Yeah.
Let's do real
We've been
time.
talking about iterative processes
Yes.
today.
Yeah.
We're fluid today.
Yeah.
I agree, Bonnie, thank you.
You can edit this on the fly.
Yeah,
It's like, would it be better to throw it into a Google Doc?
Yeah, I mean,
But
not-
but
let's not edit
careful
by
of the
this logic.
wordsmithing.
I know, I don't want to get too into it. That's the
Yes.
thing. I'm like, okay, I can live with some repetition,
Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
right? But if you're gonna throw it in a Google Doc, have a few hyphens to add.
I5.
No, I was gonna do African American community. Well, I5, well, there's, because we're a little bit, and there's some inconsistency. There's I-5 up above, and then I5 without a dash on the second paragraph, but like I said, I can live with those kinds of things.
I will start a revised version.
Oh, if you can make an addition, if you can put social and environmental justice gesture.
Would you like that on the new paragraph that I've added from the big picture perspective, or where would you like that?
This is, I'm looking at the document that Michelle just sent,
Yes,
and it's in the second paragraph where it says meaningful social justice gesture.
yes.
I would like to say, add environmental justice. Meaningful
Will do.
social and environmental
Yes.
justice gesture.
Put this in tracking.
Yeah.
So meaningful social and environmental justice gestures.
Yeah, or environmental and social justice, and it's been in alpha order.
This is as big as it gets, really. Oh my goodness. Shouldn't the I-5 Rose Quarter Highway Cover Project?
Well, it's been referred to as the I-5 Rose Quarter Project.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's not the Highway Cover Project.
Well,
It
it
was
could
never
be.
that.
Last I knew it was the I-5 Rose Quarter Project, but
That's what government entities are called.
That's what it's officially called.
Do you have the typo on the green infrastructure? It's missing a verb in the first sentence,
Yes.
missing the word are.
yes, that is the typo that I saw as soon as I looked at it a second time.
Are you taking requests verbally right now, or are we waiting for a discussion? I have two pieces, but I can hold them.
Why don't we hold them for a second and give everybody a minute just to read over it really quickly?
Do you want hyphenation?
I'm gonna change the I-5s to be hyphenated, so I'm gonna do that.
So I'm gonna request silence for 1 minute, just to give everybody a chance to read it. And then we can go through and make the additions. That way, we're not talking over each other while folks are trying to read.
Are we in the moment of silence now?
Yep. Wait, is everybody ready to help Paul get this over the finish line? Are we ready, or do we need another minute?
Can I make my 3 small changes?
Yes,
Okay. Second paragraph. Please hyphenate African American and African American
Done.
community.
Yep.
Your new paragraph, hyphenate big picture and from a big picture perspective.
Where are you when you're saying that?
second page.
Second page, thank you.
And then the paragraph right below that, replace we will with to. to reiterate some of the concerns.
Gotcha. I've also, based on your earlier recommendation, by listen to delete this repetitive sentence that
Great.
Parks Board Land Use and Infrastructure Working Group has continued to track the project and review documents.
Great. And you mentioned the infrastructure working group down below. There
Yeah.
you might add a space between the last bullet and that paragraph, but
Where's that? I'm sorry, I'm not.
just at the bottom of your bullets of concerns.
Oh, got it. Yes, thank you.
And you might want to take out the at this time, your closing sentence.
Any kind of formatting, like appearance wise, I will probably be doing anyway.
And where's the at this time, Bonnie? I'm not.
At the very closing sentence. Thank you for the opportunity to comment at this time.
Oh, just thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Albina Vision Trust or just Albina Vision?
Albina Vision Trust is the name of the organization.
Right, so in here where it says Albina Vision, it should be Albina Vision Trust then,
At the last.
as part
And
of
then-
one of the bullet
Page two.
points.
In parenthesis, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Group editing. I love
Other
it.
additions.
What a nightmare.
Elena.
Paul,
Wait a minute.
I've been in some group think processes that have been much more off the rails than this.
two things, both bigger picture, not copy editing. I'm trying really hard not
Yeah,
to
yeah.
do that. Your new language around the key shortcomings on the north and south ends of the project. I appreciate the
What page?
additions there. It's between pages 1 and 2. The repetitiveness between those two paragraphs, you list out the same potential other uses. Could we shorten this by a few words by just saying we would recommend similar changes in the south end park space as we do in the north triangular wedges, something so that we're not literally saying the same words again.
Okay,
I also worry that with the addition of the bullet points, it starts to sound like we're kind of poo-pooing the addition of open space generally. And I wonder if we need that, if it's adding value, or if we do want to put it in, if we could just say, we'll point out that we have in the past offered up other concerns that we hope you take into account as you figure out the best way to include green space, but listing it all after listing other concerns starts to feel to me like we are weighing in against green space on the cap, and that makes me a little bit uncomfortable.
yeah, that's not the intention, clearly.
Yeah.
One small question, the word, sorry.
I'm happy to refer back to the fact that we've included other comments, and I can shoot you language on that, or if we want to remove it altogether, I'm fine with that. I just worry that the way it is sounds very different.
Or maybe just rephrase the lead into the bullet points. Because it sounds so, we will reiterate, you know, that just sounds so.
We are glad to see the inclusion of open space and open and recreational space in this project. There are pieces we hope you take into account as you place park space in the best available areas, and then the bullet points,
Yes,
something like that,
makes
Patty.
it sound like, you know,
We
there's a
want this
positive
and
green
let's do
space,
it the
but-
right way.
yeah.
I'll also note that,
Bonnie, 1 second, you have Ally.
oh, sorry,
Sorry,
mine
let
is
me finish this
administrative.
thought bef- I can only
Let's let Paul
process
do, I
something.
just gave him a big one.
Let's let
Fingers are flying.
him concentrate, and this is the order that I have for folks. I have Ally, I have Jonathan, and then I have Bonnie.
Okay,
You ready?
Just
Okay,
a question about removing the word prior before the African American community that was displaced, just because displacement is, it makes it sound like a people back then, and displacement is ongoing and has, you know, effects on communities ongoing. So it feels more like a historical thing versus a living.
Historical and current.
Yeah, so just removing the word prior.
okay,
Thank you, Ally.
done.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yeah, Paul, you said this is arriving after the formal public comment period.
Correct.
Do we want to approach it as a public comment, or do we want to have an ask or response, or to try to receive more details maybe that we don't have on some of these issues that I may have
That's a
thought
very
about?
good question. Typically, from my experience with NEPA, they don't need to comment at this point. So we're just kind of putting them on notice that we're watching. So that's why I didn't ask for a response.
And PBOT, the project manager from PBOT is copied on it.
Yeah.
So the most really like the city entity that is most closely engaged in this process will then be aware of the stance of the board.
Is the commissioner or a city copy on this too then?
I don't think it is, but you could,
We should.
you could copy me and Commissioner Dan Ryan.
Both. Okay, doing that right now.
Bonnie.
So the prior letterhead was correct with the new board chair and vice chair. This one is old and it has me as chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get,
I was trying to say it when Michelle was in the room.
it's
but
all right, we'll tell
she's-
Michelle. We gotta update the letterhead anyway.
Others.
Paul?
One sec.
Yep. I just thought of more copies.
Yeah, okay, so I've got Commissioner Ryan and Sharon Dalio.
Tara Wozniak, interim PBOT director, WASIAK. And Commissioner Renee Gonzalez. Michelle, when Paul's done with all the edits, we also have to update the letterhead because it has Bonnie as chair and probably missing board members.
Yeah. Oh, like.
Since we mentioned Albina Vision Trust, should Winter be copied too?
That's up to the board. I don't think it would hurt.
Think it's better to include friends?
I think that's a good
And
idea.
frenemies.
If we haven't communicated with them about the letter previously, is it too much?
Weird.
Is it weird to then, right? We didn't engage them. So is it then weird to just, oh, hey, here's what we did?
Well, we can look at it as a starting conversation. Understanding that we're coming at this as a position of parks. And I would also say that, did you want to jump in? Go ahead. The other thing is that we can definitely have this as a starter conversation. And as I said before, a lot of times when we're looking at these large projects, especially for community members that have dealt with environmental injustices and, government neglect for a period of time, parks may not be their priority. And so even if it's not their priority, I think it's important for us to say that they still need these spaces. It needs to be integrated in a particular way, even though there might be higher priorities like stopping displacement and getting other resources in that area. Alana.
I think that we should CC them. I think that there should be a phone call first though, so that they know that it's coming in the context within which it's coming. And I am happy to think through whether that phone call best comes from one of us or from Paul or somebody else who's put in the work on coming up with the recommendation, but I think we should give them a heads up and include them on the letter.
I would agree, the heads up is important.
Yeah, and so if we decide to do that, are we also willing to correct the content of the letter based on that conversation? If so, then we don't want to vote on this today. We want to have that conversation first and just vote on, we're happy where it is now, with the understanding that after we have this conversation, there might be adjustments. Are we willing to do that as a board?
I think if you're gonna bring someone into the conversation, you have to be open to it. Otherwise, it's just, hey, here's what we're doing. I mean, I don't know.
It's not collaborative if we don't do it that way.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna put forth, and hopefully we can be in agreement, that we're going to finish wordsmithing this and get it to the point that we feel comfortable enough to share it with hopefully a future collaborator on this, and then vote to move it forward with whatever adjusted language in July and vote on it. And so it'll be the second week of July, which is what, 3 weeks from now or something like that? So that's what I'm putting on the table. Do we have like, Alex, go ahead.
If Albina does have proposed changes, I would recommend those be sent to the board ahead of the July meeting. So if there's some back and forth conversation, then there's time for that versus it being July at the meeting and it's like, oh wait, we can't.
And we do this again?
Yeah, I don't want to do that. So I would recommend, opening it up and putting have any questions by this or, forever hold your peace kind of.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to move this, what I heard before, move at the speed of community. And so understanding that a lot of these community groups are handling a lot of things. So there's no guarantee that we are gonna be able to sit and talk with them by July. And are we okay with that? I'd rather move at the speed of community than
That seems appropriate. There's no,
apologize for overstepping.
sorry.
No, go for it.
Yeah, it seems totally appropriate. There's no deadline that's forcing us to, I was just trying to complete this before I left. So would someone spell Winta's full name for me, because I don't recall? Is it W-Y-N-T-A?
I think it's I-N-T.
Ryan. And I think it's Johannes.
I see, and I think this is a perfect time, if you were to hand that over, that we get all the names correct.
Yeah.
The outreach that we need to do.
Johannes.
I think so.
I think it's Johannes.
Johannes?
W-I-N-T-A, capital Y-O-H-A-N-N-E-S. I believe that's what it is.
All right, any other additions, questions, thoughts?
It's procedural more than anything.
Okay.
So I think where we are right now is that there isn't a motion, but it's basically, we're gonna go to Albina and see if they have any input or not. I guess I'd like to make a motion that if Albina doesn't have any additions, that he be authorized to send the letter out. I mean, I might be optimistic, but it's like, it could happen.
I think that's entirely possible because, Winta's been very involved in these conversations, kind of knows what's going on. She says, hey, you guys want to support our vision? Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's a good amendment.
First, I guess we should say, is there a second to that? And then we can have some conversation about what that means.
I'll second it.
So we have a second. Okay, so I
think the conversation with Winta will be the board chair should also be part of that conversation because she is the chair of her organization.
I plan to show up. And are there other folks that want to show up with me? Paul, I know you're no longer on the board, but is that something that you want to do? Or a representative from the working group will work as well.
Yeah,
And we can talk about that later. I won't put you on the spot right now.
yeah,
but-
I'm happy to be part of that. My schedule's gonna be very cramped the next couple of weeks, but happy to be part of that if it works out.
Don't change your email address.
I'm not changing my.
Otherwise, all right, any other discussion on this? All right, so you want to reiterate what you said?
It's just that, that if there is no changes provided by Albina, that Paul be authorized to actually, that the chair and co-chair be authorized to sign and send the letter out.
That is what we're voting on. All those in favor? All right.
Adam walks in.
And it looks like that passes. Do we have any abstentions or rejections? All right.
I don't see Aaron.
Psychology.
I didn't see Aaron.
I don't think Aaron's
No, I
with
saw
us
her hand
anymore.
raised.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm here. I'm here. I'm in favor. Also, I was gonna say earlier, I'm happy to be in conversations with Winta if that would be helpful. I know her quite well, so, or not, just someone from the working group would be fine too.
Great, we'll be in conversation and get a group together. Thank you, Aaron. All right. And one more time, any public comments? Any new business? All right, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn. Thank you so much, everyone. And we're gonna have lunch and then there's more work for us, but
Lunch should be here between now and 11:45.
so it's time to mingle. So I hope we can get up and walk around and move around a little bit. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bio, yes.
Leaves.
So we can just step out on the balcony, wouldn't that be nice?